Okay, hi everybody. Very happy to be here to talk to you. I'll also be talking about transparency, but from a different level and another background, I would say. So my name is Thijs. I work for Alliander. We are in charge of the gas grid and the electricity grid in large parts of the Netherlands. So we are an energy company, and we're heavily involved in the smart city movement. Let's put it like that. And together with our partners, the AMS Institute in Amsterdam and ELAT, we're running this program called Democracy by Design, which is basically on fair algorithms, fair use of data, and fair use of platform business models in a city context. Because a lot of the debate about the smart city movement is still about how to use this and how to make business out of it, how to increase efficiency and things like that. And there's not very much talk about MyData stuff in the smart city world. So that's the program we're running right now. And today I'll be sharing with you some of the preliminary results of a design project we did on a charging station for electric vehicles. And I'll tell you about that. So first I'll just give you a little bit of background about the smart cities and electric mobility. After that, the challenge of the project that we faced, and then some suggestions and conclusions that came out of that. So smart cities, you have to understand, the first thing you have to understand, in our definition, this is about cities infrastructures which are like classical infrastructures. Many of these were started in the 19th century. So think of things like electricity grids, think of things like sewage systems, water systems, roads, all these things. Maybe the picture over there is a little bit old, but you know what I mean. You see, these are really old infrastructures. And the thing about them is they're rather vital to society and economy in the cities. For instance, if the electricity grid goes down, there's not much else that will remain functioning in society. And they're more or less all, at least in Western countries, like commonly available. They're available to us all more or less under the same conditions for the same tariffs and things like that. And then it has been like that for decades. And then suddenly this IoT movement comes around, and suddenly there's talk about services becoming more dynamic and personalized. So the first thing we do, we install sensors and things in our electricity grid. Because right now, the only way grid operators know when, for instance, a grid malfunctions, we have one sensor, and that's basically just people giving us a phone call. There's actually no information about those grids. But other use cases are basically about making infrastructure more dynamic and personalized. One example, there was this pilot with a traffic light system in an area at a pedestrian crossing. And this was in an area in Tilburg, the city of Tilburg, where there are a lot of elderly people living there. So they did this pilot, and elderly people, they walk a little bit slower, so they had some difficulty crossing the road in time. So they made the system, there was a system that registered, I believe, their MAC address of their device in their pocket, and they had this app, and then the traffic light would remain on for a little bit longer, so they could actually, the green light, so they could actually cross the road. So there are some very nice use cases in this. But the thing is also, as you must be aware, this also leads to a risk for unfair treatment and data, because there are so many appliances you can use. And the first thing right now is it's becoming adaptive to like environmental conditions, for instance, the quality of the air, how much light there is in the city, but it will also become personalized in some years. And the point about smart cities is, and that's why I'm very happy to be here, we're not quite there yet. I mean, what we're doing right now with pilots, they are not very much personalized, but we expect this to come in the coming years. So I kind of hope that to get the inspiration here to do it right, the first time in this whole smart city context. So we had this challenge, okay, so unfair treatment, also about algorithms. So we were wondering, can maybe transparency help to solve this problem, to make people able to better stand up for their rights? And then we figured about the question, so what does transparency actually mean in a smart city context? Because transparency is mainly, the way it's being understood today in regards to software, is like 99% of the time people are talking open source. But open source doesn't work when you work with the general public for two obvious reasons. Firstly, when you're walking around in the city, you're not sitting behind the computer. And secondly, even if you were sitting behind the computer, many people cannot understand the code. So if you want to give them some idea of these adaptive systems, how they work and what's going on, you need to figure out a new language, how you can talk to people about these issues. And that's what we try to do. So we thought this is a rather complex issue. There's not much work being done on that. So we thought, well, maybe just start very simple, or relatively simple. We pick one of these smart objects from a smart city, a charging station, and try to redesign that from the purpose of transparency. So we did that. And now you have to know a little bit about electric mobility. So the first thing is, at some point, and that point will not be very far, electric cars will replace gasoline and diesel cars. So maybe you've read in the media about this ban on combustion engines. That will actually come. And then the thing is, charging these vehicles, but many of them will be battery operated, that will not be a trivial challenge. That's actually a problem. And how can I explain that? Well, you have to know 2 or 3 things about the electricity system. The first thing is that supply and demand always have to be in balance at the same time. So if you get home right now and you switch on your light bulb, probably a gas turbine somewhere in the system will start running a little bit more speedily in order to keep up with increased demand. Well, as you can imagine, if the production in the energy system or the electricity system will become increasingly solar and wind energy, you can't switch those on and off. So we have to basically do this in another way and make demand follow supply rather than the other way around. So basically use electricity when the sun is shining or when the wind is blowing. And the second thing why it's not trivial has to do with the age of all these infrastructures. Some of the cables in the electricity grid in Amsterdam were put there, I think, slightly before the Second World War. So these are no way dimensioned up till the huge demand electric cars will make. So one of the solutions we're actually thinking about is smart charging. And smart charging is basically a simple principle. Right now, when you plug your car into the grid, it just starts charging. And smart charging means it will charge, it will stop, it will start charging again, it will stop, it will probably even discharge at some points based on kind of conditions around you. So I'll talk you through a kind of these smart charging algorithms that will basically decide for people whether their cars will be charged in the morning or whether they will not be charged. So the first thing people look at, for instance, that algorithm would look at is the solar panel production actually available at that time or in the coming years? Another thing which feeds into the algorithm is basically what is the current electricity price and what will the electricity price be in coming hours and things like that. The grid condition is also something we look at. Another thing you have to look at is when does the user actually need to leave? Because if you have to leave very quickly, then there's much less flexibility in making up a charging scheme than when you only have to leave in the morning, for instance, when it's at night. And there are some other things as well. For instance, how full is the battery exactly? What is your next destination? And also, what is your charging privilege? Right now, many municipalities favor the idea of car sharing schemes, and that talks that maybe electric car sharing schemes should get priority over other cars when charging. So when you look at this from a MyData perspective, there's a combination of kind of semi-public data or public data on the one hand and personal data on the other end. And our expectation is that this is only compared to all the other talks about personal data on this conference. These are just the basics. We expect this optimization to continue and continue and continue. For instance, not only look at your schedule, but also look at your partner's schedule or things like that. So, what's the problem then? Well, basically, there will be more and more and more inputs and more parties delivering inputs into this smart charging process. And the current systems are very much designed not to give transparency about this, because people feel that will be understanding that will be a hassle to consumers. They simply want their car to be charged. And this leads to risk for unfair treatment. So we thought, that will lead to risks for abuse. And just to give you some ideas of what abuse could mean in this context, well, the first thing was maybe at some point in time, these are results of workshops we help with experts and early adapter users. Maybe like these charging privileges, so can I charge before you or can you charge before me, will at some point be part of the penal system. Like right now we have the tendency in some countries to give people like these, when they did something a little bit wrong, you make them pick up paper in the park or something like that. But you could replace this by simply saying, okay, you're not going to be able to charge before all the other people in your street have charged. Something like that. And they felt that kind of crossed an ethical boundary, because this is something which is clearly out of context. You could easily use this to sabotage competitors' equipment. But it sounds like it's a business problem, but that competitors' equipment could easily be your car. Because there can be incentives to charge and discharge and charge and discharge very fast to make batteries of cars break down swifter, so you sooner need to buy a replacement, something like that. And also something like vulnerability pricing. If the system knows you need to leave and you need to leave now, we need to build in the checks and balances that it's not going to charge you the maximum if you have no other options, right? So these kind of forms of abuse were thought up. And we thought about transparency. Well, So we thought, what can transparency actually mean in this context? And there were some design decisions or design choices. The first choice is about content. So if you want to explain this to people, what actually are you going to make explicit? Is it the code? That was what we started out with. On what level of transparency do you want to offer to people? Do you want to offer just kind of superficial understanding of what's happening around them in a smart city? Or do you want to allow them to deep dive into the code itself and also maybe check out for themselves whether the system has been hacked or not? The third thing is, who's actually your target audience? Is this EV drivers? Or is it broader? Because other people are also like walking around there in public space. And if this charging point is collecting your Wi-Fi for some reason, that applies to you when you are a pedestrian as well. Or is it mainly for supervisory bodies? It's about the moment of transparency. So when actually do you need to provide users with transparency, and the channel you chose. So we had a lot of workshops and discussions, and there were some things that we came up with. Well, this is mainly, we thought, let's focus mainly on just a very modest aim. Let's give the user a fair chance to spot abuse. Not solve it, but just to spot it. But this will be abuse that will not occur on a daily basis, and for most people probably never at all. And there's too much information anyhow. So how are you going to solve this? And then we chose in our design matrix to focus on the things which are right now printed in bold. Like the outputs, I'll just give a little bit of explanation on them. The output is basically, we started with the aim to make the code itself transparent to users. Because the code you've seen right now and all the effectors, this is by no way at the level of artificial intelligence or very difficult algorithms. So we thought maybe if we can just start by finding out how you can make this known to people, then we have a starting point. But it actually turned out that our designers we hired for this, they were not able to figure out a way how you can easily explain even a simple algorithm to people like that. We found, for instance, that metaphors, they don't work. And we played around a lot with like water pipes and faucets closing and opening again. But there's no way to make a relatively simple algorithm known in those terms. So we thought, let's focus on the output. And I'll tell a little bit more about that later. We basically chose to focus on the superficial level. We also chose to focus on EV drivers. And it turned out that actually it was interesting to give them a perspective during the charging transaction or also after. And we chose to focus on the charging station itself. Because obviously you can always make an app, but we feel that like human beings, they will actually walk around in this city and you should not just communicate with them through an app. So the prototype, that will be revealed in 2 weeks' time in the city of Eindhoven. The mayor of Eindhoven will reveal this. And that, to our knowledge, will be the first object that has been, like in public space, a smart object in public space that has been particularly designed from the purpose of transparency. But I'm not allowed at present to show you the image of what it looks like, but I can maybe describe it because I have permission to do that. But so the first thing you need to do is think Tetris. So we thought up an interface that basically works like Tetris, with lines which go down and down and down. And a typical charge point has 2 or 3 sockets. So each socket is being represented by dots in a different color. So there will be red ones, green ones, and blue ones. And the dots themselves in the Tetris, they basically show the planning of the charge that is happening. So if all the dots, the columns are the same width, then everybody gets the same charging capacity. But if there's a lot of blue dots, the blue user will get further. And that's basically the thing we found, that users in a quick overview actually have an idea of what's happening, and they also can form this like of ethical opinion about that. So hey, why is this guy getting much more than me, while he arrived at the charge point way later than I did, something like that. So then you can give them the information they need to say, hey, I need some more information about this, maybe claim my right, something like that. So the suggestions we came out of this. First one is, in a smart city, try to focus on the objects rather than just creating apps for everything. You can always create an app, there's nothing to be said against that, but we really need new language to tell about what all these surveillance cameras are doing, what smart lampposts are doing, and these things. The second suggestion was, at least in this particular case, maybe rather to get people's interest, maybe not focus on the personal data that goes in there, maybe also not focus on the algorithm that goes in there, but solely focus on the outcome, and especially the relative outcome. Because we found that people respond to the fact that, hey, why is your car being charged more faster than mine is? So that's a way to get their attention and also as a first point of information. The third suggestion, and we also found that was very easy to give people a sense of understanding what's happening, you simply make the involved parties in these automatic decisions known. So if there's a grid operator out there which somehow gives input into this smart charging station, just put it on the device. And if it's the tax office that maybe tries to collect the tax you haven't paid yet in an indirect way by revoking your charging privileges, put their logo on there, something like that. So then you give people a basic understanding of what's happening in public space. And the third one is maybe that we should figure out a way how to have a receipt of the decisions that were taken by the algorithm. So they know, and if they, in the end they're not satisfied with what happened, they can go to another expert and basically say, hey, this is what happened to me, and can you see whether my rights have been violated, or something like that. So this is basically the best we came up with right now, but this is to us at least a new field, and we're really happy if people have better ideas to do this, especially on the two questions. And I stress again, this was a relatively very simple case. So how do you show more abstract prioritizations that take place? Can we figure out a language to do that people can maybe understand? And the thing is also, if you give people insight in the relative priorities, then you may also violate the privacy of the other people involved. So how do you solve this problem? Well, the next steps we're going to take is on the 28th of April, the prototype will be released. There will be an English language movie at the time. There will be a white paper there for people who are interested in it. I'll show you the website where you can check that out right now. And then we're going to test this prototype in a real setting. We're having talks about that right now to see how people actually respond to this and whether they can relate to this kind of transparency at all. Okay. That's it. Thank you very much.